Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri. Tight economy, tight budgets. How's that affecting the Sheriff's Department in this new year?
Well, very significantly, especially because of the past. We've cut our general fund budget in the last 4 years by $108 million and reduced it by 600 positions. And
wow.
So as we look forward now to preparing the fiscal year 14 budget, which we are in the midst of doing now and have to submit it this spring, by all accounts, it's not looking any better. So it's very challenging, and we're at a point in many of our components where we just can't cut anymore because we have to draw that line because we can't let it affect public safety. We've had great successes, even with those budget cuts. Crime's down in our jurisdiction the last 3 years by 12%. Arrests are up. But we have to stop at a certain point. You just can't do anymore. So it's a great challenge, and we'll know more as we get into January, February, what the specific numbers look like. But it doesn't look like we're going to get much reprieve.
Now, you plead your case in Tallahassee?
No, actually, the sheriff's budget comes from the county commission.
Yeah.
And the sheriff is an independent constitutional office. And the sheriff answers just to the voters. The sheriff has a role, though, with county government, and that the sheriff's budget comes from the county and comes from the county commission. So they're the ones that set the countywide millage, and so our budget comes from the county.
But all the county sheriff's departments are having the same issues, some probably with deeper cuts than even Pinellas or Hillsborough.
Well, that's true. And some, well, in true to the point, I think that the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, and I talked to the sheriffs around the state, I think that we've experienced, if not the deepest, certainly one of the deepest. We've experienced deeper cuts than Hillsborough has.
Really? Wow.
Yes. And I know Broward's experienced some deep cuts, but we're probably on par with Broward, from what I know. But in some cases, in some counties around the state, they really haven't experienced serious reductions. Some of it is how it's done in individual counties and some of the priorities that are set. But here in Pinellas County, for the last 4 years, we have really, I'd say we're at the top, if not leading the state as far as cuts are concerned.
Wow. How does this affect the budget cuts have to be affecting police departments? And you have a whole lot of individual cities within the county, and most all of them have a police department of some size. They've got to be experiencing the same issues that you have.
Sure, and again, some more than others. On January 6th, the St. Pete Beach Police Department will cease to exist, and the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office will now be the police provider in St. Pete Beach. So that means 13 of Pinellas County's 24 cities don't have a police department. They contract with the sheriff's office to be their police provider. The savings to St. Pete Beach on an annual basis is about $2.5 million.
Yeah, but the budget comes back to you.
Well,
then it's your problem.
Well, right, it is, but it's still a savings, and because if nothing else from economies of scale, it'll be a big savings, and that's driven because of the fiscal situation that the city's in. Big problem with our pension fund and other fiscal considerations. So definitely the finances affect the city police departments. Again, some more than others, and it depends from city to city. And what their tax base is and what their revenue is and the housing market. All
the budgets and economy being talked about, y'all still acquired some new vehicles, didn't you?
We did, and we had, well, of course,
some unique vehicles, I should probably say.
Well, they are. Yeah, we're transitioning our fleet to Chevy Tahoes. Unfortunately, and gosh, I wish that Ford had continued to make the Crown Vics. They are really the quintessential police car, or what everybody knows to be a police car, and they have. And we would have continued with the Crown Vics because they're a great car. I drive one. I mean, and it's got almost 80,000 miles on it, but it's still running strong. They're great vehicles, and they last a long time. But Ford stopped making them. And it told us a couple of years ago it was coming, and then eventually they just said stop, and you're going to get your last one. You're not getting anything else. So what we did is looked at the market of what our police vehicles, because they have to be rated specifically for pursuits and for police function. And there's only a few manufacturers of them. There's the Dodge Charger. There's a Chevy Impala. Ford had a couple of products are out. The Ford products were very new, prototype-type products. And we asked the deputies to drive them and make sure that they were conducive and that they'd fit our needs. And unfortunately, most of the new cars are very, very small cars. It's tough to get all the equipment in them, especially when you have two-person cars. You're sitting in there crunched in on the passenger side. So one of the vehicles we looked at was the police-rated Chevy Tahoe. And actually, because we're buying it under the state contract, is that we're getting it cheaper than we would get the Dodge Charger. And it's only about $1,500 more than the small Chevy Impala, which doesn't work for us operationally. So we're getting it at a great price, and we're getting it cheaper than we would if we actually bought a car in the Dodge Charger. So it's very competitive, and they're bigger vehicles, they're safe vehicles, they'll meet our needs. So we're going to transition the fleet over to the Tahoes.
Yeah, you guys are like rolling computer IT units when you're out on the road anymore.
Oh, absolutely. We've got so much equipment in those vehicles, and the trunks and now the back of the Tahoes are just chock full of everything. And we've got all kinds of electronics and all kinds of computers and tons of equipment in all the vehicles, and it gets very tight in there. So you got to have something that the deputies can work out of.
Just hire smaller, shorter people.
Yeah, no, we don't want to, take everybody, but it's their office, so you have to be comfortable and it has to be functional, most importantly.
A couple of things that come to mind. I saw an article in one of the papers the other day. There's an ongoing discussion about the traffic cameras at major intersections, and the article read something like the crashes are up, or there are more crashes at these particular intersections. So obviously the debate hasn't been satisfied by everybody.
No, and I think that the article you're talking about, and I saw the same article, was in, I believe, the St. Pete Times. It had to do within the city of St. Petersburg. Uh-huh. And they installed red light cameras in the city of St. Pete earlier this year, and they've done an analysis from the citations. But the report shows that crashes are up at some of the intersections where they do have the red light cameras. So the debate has not been settled. The debate goes on. Personally, I'm not in favor of red light cameras. I think that there should be interaction between the deputy or the officer and the violator, and based on the totality of the circumstances, a decision should be made how to handle that particular violation, whether it's appropriate for a warning, it's appropriate for a citation. Just to have somebody sitting there watching a TV monitor, and if the wheels happen to cross the line on the road, then somebody automatically gets a $156 ticket. I don't think, personally, I'm not a fan of that. I don't think that's the way it should be. I think you should take into account a lot of the factors, including the driving itself, the dangerousness of it or lack thereof, the violator's history or lack thereof. And sometimes you can have just as effective traffic enforcement with the warnings as you can tickets. And I think there needs to be that interaction. And I think that traffic enforcement needs to be done for public safety, not as a revenue generator, but only for public safety purposes and traffic safety purposes. And I think that requires interaction between the deputy and the citizen who commits a traffic violation. So I'm not a fan of the red light cameras, and we don't have any in the county area. And I've had some discussions with some of the county commissioners about it. They've asked about it from an ordinance standpoint. I'm not a fan of it or in favor of it, and I do support, and we do all the time, traffic enforcement and effective traffic enforcement. But just to have, again, a line in the road and a camera, and it becomes a gotcha type system where people got to pay, I don't support that.
Another hot topic, internet cafes.
Sure.
Are they still open? Is it a state issue? Is it county by county issue? Well, what's the status of that?
Well, it should be a state issue. I would hope and ask that the legislature deal with the issue. I don't know whether they will this session or not. There's been some discussion and some effort in previous sessions to deal with it. It hasn't gone anywhere. As far as we're concerned, when you apply Florida law to the internet cafes, they are illegal. There are those on the other side who can make arguments that they're not. I don't think those arguments hold any water, and we've had successful prosecutions as a result of existing law. But because of existing law that really hasn't kept up with the technology, it provides some arguments for those on the other side. So they think they can push the envelope, and they open these things up, and we get complaints about them. Our policy right now is that in Pinellas County is that we will investigate them when we receive complaints. There's a lot of significant issues in our community, a lot of big issues, and we have to use our resources wisely, just as we were talking about a couple minutes ago with the budget.
Sure.
So we don't go out proactively. We don't go out seeking it out. But when we get complaints, then we have an obligation to conduct an investigation. And if we send people in and determine that they're in violation, we ask them to shut down. We send them a letter and ask them to shut down and hope we get voluntary compliance. If we don't get voluntary compliance, then we'll take the appropriate enforcement action. We'd rather just people voluntarily comply. Some counties, Hillsborough is one of them, have enacted ordinances And so some of it becomes on a county-by-county basis. But state law is there. State law is effective. State law applies. But, again, there is some room for those who want to make an argument that the law doesn't apply to the Internet cafes. Again, I disagree with that. But the legislature, I hope, will take this up and solve that debate. And either way, and and it's a policy decision. I believe it should be a statewide policy decision so that people know from county to county that everybody knows what the rules are. Is either affirm that they are illegal by making some tweaks to the statute that takes away that argument on the other side, or if the legislature so decided that they wanted to make them legal and regulate them, but let everybody know what the rules are so they can act accordingly. I think business people want to certainly make money. They want to get engaged in profitable endeavors, but they want to comply with the law too. And there's a little bit of room out there where there's debate, and I think that debate for fairness to everybody needs to be eliminated.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying. When you've got fewer and fewer people to do the job of protection, you really have to prioritize, and there are other things. Still have a drug issue? Is that a big deal?
Oh, absolutely. It's still the biggest issue we have.
Well, you're dealing with prescription stuff now.
Sure. The prescription drug abuse epidemic is the number one issue, the number one public safety issue, and most likely it will continue to be for a long time because it spills over into many other things. And we are dealing with it, and we're dealing with it effectively, but we as law enforcement are not going to solve this problem. And we can't arrest our way out of the problem because it's an addiction problem. And it has to be approached from a multifaceted perspective. And that is, there has to be prevention, education, treatment, and enforcement. But enforcement isn't going to solve it because it's addiction. If we're going to try and make a real effort at solving the problem, it's going to have to be done through prevention, education, and treatment because you can lock people up, and if it's an addiction issue, they're going to be right back out on the street again and right back at it. So it becomes a revolving door. But it affects – the reason why it's so just horrific is because – and it's unlike no problem we've seen before – is because it affects all walks of life. And it crosses all socioeconomic lines, all races, ages, national origins, gender. Back in the 90s when crack cocaine was the drug of choice and really a crack cocaine epidemic, you generally didn't see people 80, 85 years old addicted to crack cocaine. Today you see people 80, 85 years old addicted to painkillers.
Wow.
You didn't see people in certain socioeconomic areas addicted to cocaine and crack cocaine, and you generally saw, especially crack cocaine, generally in lower socioeconomic areas, but you don't see that with the painkillers. And with these opiate-based drugs, is that you see them in people who are 12 or 13, and you see them in people who are 80, 85, and you see it everywhere from Tarpon Springs to Tierra Verde and from the Gulf to the Bay. And it is prolific across our community. And so because it's so widespread, and then the ease of access, because you can just go to the local drugstore and get the drugs. You don't have to go find a drug dealer on a street corner. So you put all that together, and it's really a perfect storm that's caused a major problem. And
you got the kids, and I'm saying kids, you got junior high and maybe even older elementary school kids. They're doing the pill parties.
Sure.
And a lot of those came out of a parent's medicine cabinet.
Well, that's right. And again, it goes back to that ease of access. When a lot of us were younger, and you're 13, 14, 15 years old, we did something bad, quote, on a Friday or Saturday night. Probably
it was usually drinking a beer.
Right. You went to the refrigerator and you grabbed a beer out of there or a bottle of wine and said, "Boy, this stuff tastes terrible," and you spit it out and you never did.
And you got sick, but you still tried to do it again.
Right. Well, the problem today is that not only are they grabbing that beer and that wine and that alcohol, but they're also going to the pill cabinets and they're taking those bottles of pills. And this is where we're seeing the devastating consequences because the kids do that and they die, and it's horrific because you start mixing that. So we ask people when they don't need those medications anymore that they get rid of them. We have Operation Medicine Cabinet that we do periodically where we collect those. Also, in our two main stations, one on Ulmerton Road and one in the North County in Dunedin, we have drop boxes there where people can come in any day, any time of the day, and deposit their no longer needed medication. So we ask people to not keep them around the house when you don't need them because you eliminate that problem. And if it's kids,
especially if you got kids
or grandkids,
right,
or
true, yeah.
We even see now we get calls where people have them in their house and they have a service provider that comes in. And it could be anybody to clean the carpets, to do electrical work, plumbing work, or something around the house. They ask to use the restroom. Next thing you know, the medicine cabinet's cleared out.
Wow.
So we get those kinds of calls. So it's a big problem.
training programs for the Sheriff's Department?
Well, we do a lot of training. Very, very important. We have, and I'll put our training section up against any law enforcement training section in the country. And that's one of the things that we have been emphatic about, even during these lean times, budget times, and cutbacks. We haven't cut at all in training, and we won't, because we have to make sure that our deputies stay safe and that they're well trained. And
even better trained now because there are fewer of them. I mean, you're expecting some pretty sharp people out on the road.
Absolutely, and training is so important, because how you're going to react in a stressful situation is how you train, because it just becomes reactive. And we built a new firing range. We used seized drug money to do it. We're building a scenario-based shoot house out there for training, and we will continue to do everything we can to have absolutely top-notch training for our deputies. Helicopters, planes? We do. We have helicopters.
What's the scope of your fleet?
Well, right now we have 3 helicopters, and we do have some airplanes. In fact, the fixed-wing aircraft, the planes, are kind of becoming obsolete. And probably, I'd say, first part of next year or this year, we're going to be probably selling some of them because we don't have a need for them anymore. The helicopters are absolutely essential. We have the only flight section, law enforcement flight section in Pinellas County. And none of the other. So we support not just all the sheriff's office, but every police department throughout the county. And
sure.
The K-9 deputies are out there tracking. That helicopter up there watching them is a lifeline for them and a communication source so that everybody else knows where they are. During pursuits, missing people, missing kids, along the beaches when you have people that are having problems in the Gulf, a variety of absolutely necessary situations. So the helicopters, our flight section is very important to our overall law enforcement mission here in Pinellas County.
Boats?
Sure.
You got a lot of coastline.
No, we do, and we have a marine unit, an environmental lands unit, and the marine unit's out there. We have deputies on the water 7 days a week, everywhere from, of course, the Gulf and the Bayside, as well as the lakes. We have a couple of lakes, Lake Tarpon, Lake Seminole, freshwater lakes here in Pinellas County. But our main focus, of course, is the Gulf and the Intercoastal Waterway and Tampa Bay. There's a lot of things going on. The Sheriff's Office is still a big organization. We have a lot of responsibility, a lot of great people. The most important thing for us to focus on is to keep the community safe and to make sure that we continue to drive crime down. We've had a lot of success here. Like I said, in the last 3 years, crime is down 12%. For the first 6 months of 2012, it was down another 8%. We'll see the numbers here shortly for the whole year. Arrests are up 28%. We've had 100% case closure in our homicides, and that's really the trick and the skill set that comes into play here is making sure that we don't take it below a waterline and that we don't just become satisfied with the status quo. And I won't be satisfied unless every single year that we're making progress at keeping the community safe, and that means taking the numbers down and moving them downward. And that's what our focus is going to be for 2013, 2014, and beyond.
Website where people can find information, how they can contact the Sheriff's Department, non-emergency or emergency.
Sure. Of course, anytime anybody has an emergency, is dial 911. The main number for the Sheriff's Office is 727-582-6200. And a lot of information on our website, which is www.pcsoweb.com. And there's a tremendous amount of information on there on our law enforcement function, the jail, and a variety of services that we provide to the community.
Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri.